Well, to discuss this further, joining us live from Taipei is political analyst Ross Daryl Fingold. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Hi.
Absolutely. Now, the U.S. military completes its 10th successive night of attacks. We know that the reason, and yes, but according to you, what are the strategic objectives behind this sustained campaign? Because it keeps on happening, a ceasefire happens, and then again, the retaliation and the attacks go by. Is this what we're looking at, a cycle of attacks and no solution?
Unfortunately, we do seem to be in a cycle, but I would say that the decision-making power to end this cycle is with the leadership in Iran, whether that's the military, the religious leadership, the civilian government, or of course the Revolutionary Guards. Now, there is an MOU with a ceasefire, and it's Iran that decided to attack civilian shipping in the Gulf, and that resulted in retaliation by the United States, after which Iran retaliates, and then we do get into the cycle. So I do think that to maintain the 60-day ceasefire MOU and continue negotiations, that decision-making ability really is in the hands of
All right, what we're talking about, of course, we'll get back to our guests, but what we're talking about is the United States and Iran that appear to be trapped in a relentless cycle of military retaliation. It has been 10 nights now of heavy U.S. bombing that have completely failed to break Iran's stranglehold. Now, Ross, if you can hear me right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that, of course, it was Iran, but Iran clearly had said that the Strait of Hormuz is open. And we want you to, they told the vessels to use the route that they wanted. And they had warning shots on the vessels, which they thought are not taking the route. So do you think that was fair enough? Or when you say that U.S. was retaliating to the attacks on the vessels that were crossing, not the route that Iran wanted? How do you see this going?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing here, right? The United States said, we want to have a ceasefire with you. We want to have a negotiating window of 60 days. Maybe that even would have been extended for a longer period. And Iran is insisting that civilian shipping use a route that Iran is demanding. This was not the case before the war began. And Iran is saying, we're going to attack ships. We're going to attack civilian ships who don't follow our demands. And the rest of the region or the international community, nobody is saying that they think Iran's demand is a reasonable one and that civilian shipping should follow some unilateral demand by Iran that did not exist before the war began. So I do think Iran is isolating itself with this demand. And by attacking civilian shipping, it's further isolating itself. And obviously, it does invite retaliation from the United States.
All right, that's an interesting take. Now, you say that it's isolating, but then there are ships from different countries, and different countries are wanting this war to stop. In that case, would you think that U.S.
Everybody wants... Yeah, everybody wants the war to stop.
I understand.
Even President Trump wants the war to stop. But of course, different shippers and customers, they might be willing to, in the interest of receiving a shipment, pay a fee and follow the demands of Iran's government on any given day as far as what route ships should take. But I do think, broadly speaking, the international community, and specifically countries in the region, are not supportive of a new structure, whether it's interim or certainly not long term, where Iran can dictate where ships could travel or demand fees for safe travel.
All right. But then there was also U.S. who had also proposed a fee. They had Trump had proposed a 20% charge on all cargo ships through the Strait of Hormuz. How about that?
Well, Trump, he sometimes says things with regard to international affairs that might be what he's saying as part of his negotiating strategy, playing to the media. I mean, frankly, that's just his style. And he did back away from that pretty quickly. So I don't think President Trump is actually insisting that on an open-ended basis, the United States could extract a passage fee for shipping. And certainly he's not suggesting that failure to pay, the fee would result in civilian ships being attacked by the United States military. Whereas we see that Iran is saying, if you don't follow our route, if you don't pay us, we're going to attack civilian shipping.
All right. Well, of course, when you talk about Trump's decisions, we also have the U.S. midterm elections approaching. And there are a lot of countries who want this to get over. Do you think Trump will now concede to some of the concessions coming from Iran at this point of time, or escalate this war? And if he does, can he afford to do it?
Yeah, I think, that's a great question, because he really is stuck in the middle of those competing demands. And 3 months ago, 4 months ago, when the war began, as it lasted for several weeks into March and April, he had some flexibility. But now, as the election is getting closer, I mean, clearly from a political perspective, and we know that the war is not popular in the United States, President Trump doesn't want the United States to be at war in the weeks or days before the election, and certainly not on election day. So he does have the political consideration. On the other hand, he has to consider whether or not he did achieve the goals. And the initial goal of beginning this war was to really bring to an end Iran's nuclear weapons program, which is such a threat to countries around the region. And President Trump and his team at the moment clearly also believe that they have not achieved all the concessions that they need with regard to the nuclear nuclear research and development program. And that would include an inspection regime going forward, which Iran has yet to agree to. Thus, the main reason for starting the war, at the moment at least, is unresolved. So President Trump can't back away from achieving that goal either. So he is kind of stuck in the middle of those competing pressure points.
All right, fair point. Now we also have the Gulf that is being attacked. So how do you see the Gulf countries reacting? Are they going to, of course, consider and take help from U.S. for defense? Or do you think they will pursue to help or tell U.S. to concede to Iran and maybe consider the kind of points that Iran has been making so far?
Well, there are a few competing considerations for the neighboring countries. One, I don't think they wanted a war to begin. It's disruptive to their economies. It's created destruction and death, both to military and civilian personnel. And it's going to cost a lot of money to rebuild, and also to get, once there is a long-term ceasefire or peace agreement, to get ships moving and get cargo and oil and gas moving again. So I don't think they wanted the war. But on the other hand, Iran has for many years been a threat to their national security. And we see that Iran's decision to attack civilian and military targets in its neighbors it proves once again to the neighboring countries what a threat Iran can be. So even if they feel they can't openly say we support military action against Iran, they certainly don't like Iran's behavior. And I think they will still consider, when all is said and done, the United States to be their main security partner. It's not going to be Russia. It's not going to be China, even though they maintain good relations with those countries as well. But really, their premier security partner, no matter what happens at the end of the current war, will remain the United States.
Absolutely. Of course, we'll have to wait and see what happens, because this debate can go on, but we'll have to wait and see what decision comes from President Donald Trump to see what goes forward. Thank you so much, Ross, for joining us on the broadcast and giving your opinions. Appreciate it.
Thank you.